Good evening, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. This is Rich again, back for your third and final video blog of the night for Wednesday, July 1st, 2015, around 8:17 in the evening, Billerica, Massachusetts. Clouding up, could get some passing rain showers, could be severe, and afterwards, beginning tomorrow, should be several days of perfect weather, 70s, 80s, low humidity. Looks like 90-degree days in Boston and area are projected to be late July and stuff. Some news to report. The LA Clippers have signed Paul Pierce to a 3-year contract worth $10 million. The Boston Bruins made some moves. They traded forward Riley Smith and the contract of Mark Savard to the Panthers for Jimmy Hayes, and the Bruins signed forward Matt Barkeski from the Ducks, 5-year contract worth $19 million. The Columbus Blue Jackets signed Gregory Campbell to a 2-year contract, and the Detroit Red Wings made some moves. They signed Brad Richards to a 1-year contract, and they signed defenseman Mike Green to a 3-year contract worth $19 million. And that's about it on the news. My third and final video blog subject of the night is the personality profile. This month's personality profiles from tonight through July 14th will be about 14 celebrities who appeared on the match game for one way or another. The first one is the host of the match game for many, many years, the late, great Gene Rayburn. Gene Rayburn was one of the most famous and most popular game show hosts of all time. Gene was born in Christopher, Illinois, and he grew up in nearby Chicago. His real name is Eugene Rubitson, and he was actually of Lithuanian descent. His parents came over from Lithuania at the turn of the century, and Gene was fluent in Lithuanian and stuff. And when he was in high school, he was president of his senior class, and he also was an actor in several high school plays and stuff. And then he went to Knox College in Illinois, and he studied theater and stuff. And he worked as an NBC page when he was in college and stuff. And he fought in the War II for the United States of America. He was in the United States Army Air Force, and he actually known some meteorology when he was serving our country and stuff. And when he went into radio and acting, he had to change his name because his name sounded a little too ethnic, Rubens, and he had to change it. And he looked up the phone book, and he picked the name Rayburn out in his finger out of random and stuff. And that's how he became Gene Rayburn. He started working New York City radio for years. He was a popular morning host and DJ for several radio stations in the New York City area. And he also acted in several Broadway plays and stuff. And he was a pretty good actor. He was in several off-Broadway plays. He was even in Bye Bye Birdie. He replaced a famous actor who became one of the most famous comedy actors of all time, Dick Van Dyke in Bye Bye Birdie. And his first TV gig was in the mid-50s, around 1954, and he was the announcer of The Tonight Show, starring Steve Allen. He was the announcer and sidekick for The Tonight Show with Steve Allen when that premiered in 1954 and stuff. And Gene Rayburn was working that for a few years. Then he became associated with game shows. Gene Rayburn's first appearance on a game show was in 1953 as a panelist for Mark Goodson, Bill Todman game show. The name's the same, and that started a long association with Mark Goodson and Bill Todman Productions. In 1955, Gene hosted Make the Connection, a Goodson-Todman game show, which was a panel show, and eventually he got involved in hosting game shows for many years. Like he hosted a show called Choose Up Sides, which was like kind of a kid's version of Beat the Clock in the late 50s, and he also hosted Do Re Mi, which was a kind of a musical game show where they had only 3 notes to play for a certain song. It was a pretty kind of a funny show. Like Gene had like even a little bit of a monologue before that show, and also he hosted the 50s version of Tic Tac Doe. And also Gene appeared as a panelist on Play Your Hunch, another good entertainment game show, and To Tell the Truth through the late 50s and early 60s. Plus he acted in a lot of summer stock plays and stuff, and other like stage performances and stuff. And Gene lived in New York City, but he eventually moved to Cape Cod, Massachusetts. In 1962, Gene got his most famous role when he hosted the classic Goodman-Todman game show, The Match Game, on NBC, and it was a far cry from the 70s version. This 60s version was kind of a dull version. It was basically 2 contestants playing with one celebrity against each other, matching certain words. It lasted for about 7 years on NBC and was pretty decent and stuff. They had some funny stuff, but it wasn't the far cry from what Match Game became in the 1970s. After Match Game ended in 1969, Gene Rayburn still did some radio in New York, and he appeared on What's My Line and To Tell the Truth as a panelist, but game shows were actually moving out to the West Coast to be filmed because of bigger studios and stuff and more celebrities, the access of more celebrities and stuff. And Gene still wanted to do shows in New York, but New York was dying as a TV place and everything was going out to Los Angeles. In 1972, Gene did a game show on CBS called Amateur's Guide to Love, which was only a 13-week show. Plus he did a pilot for a game show called Celebrity Matchmate, which eventually turned out to be Tattletales. And Gene, in 1973, signed on to become the host of the revamped version of Match Game on CBS, but it was changed from a kind of a serious game show to a comedy game show where there were 2 contestants playing with against 6 celebrities to match their answers, and some of the questions were double entendres and very funny. And Match Game had a cast of like panelists including Richard Dawson, Charles Nelson Riley, Brett Summers, Patty Deutsch, Fannie Flagg, Elaine Joyce, Betty White, and so many others. Match Game became a popular hit for CBS for years. At one time, it was the #1 daytime game show. It spawned a nighttime version, Match Game PM, that lasted several years as well. And Gene became very popular as well. And also he appeared on several game shows as a panelist in Los Angeles, Tattletales, Password Plus, and Hollywood Squares. And Gene still commuted from Los Angeles to Cape Cod because he loved living on the East Coast. During his time away from hosting the Match Game, Gene would like do woodworking and needlepoint, and he would tend to his garden. He loved riding motorcycles, and he opened up a skating rink and stuff. He did a lot of stuff. But towards the early 80s, when Match Game was fading away, Gene got a lot of restless and stuff. And like 1982, Gene wanted to do some other stuff, and Match Game was canceled. And so Gene Rayburn hosted a couple of shows in Boston on local television. It was on WCVB TV5. It Happened Here. Plus he did some promotional work for WBZ TV4, promoting reruns of the Match Game and stuff. And in 1983, Gene hosted a variation of Match Game Hollywood Squares out on NBC Daytime with John Bowser Bauman. He didn't like John Bowser Bauman as a host because he wanted to do the show all by himself, and he really wanted to host it with Peter Marshall, but Peter Marshall actually hosted a show before, like Match Game Hollywood Squares Hours, that replaced it, Fantasy, and NBC was not going to bring Peter Marshall back. Match Game Hollywood Squares Hour was, a very ill-fated game show that was a combination of two comedy shows, and they had joint ownership between Goodson, Todman, and Orion Pictures, which bought the rights to Hollywood Squares, and plus the Hollywood Squares version of the Match Games Hollywood Squares Hour was awful. Mark Goodson did not write Zenas for the celebrities, plus they could win on default. Before, on the original Hollywood Squares version, they would have to earn a square, but they could, if the contestant got it won and they had a block and they missed, then they could win by default. I think they did that just to save time and stuff. And Gene and had problems with the producers of Match Game Hollywood Squares Hours, and backstage he did not really like working with John Bauman. And Match Games Hollywood Squares Hour ended 9 months after it premiered in October of 1983. And Gene just afterwards, it was harder for him to get jobs because he was getting up there in age in the late 60s. He hosted a game show in 1985 called Break the Bank, which was produced by Klein and Friends, which spun off from Jack Berry and Dan Wright Productions. Break the Bank was kind of a serious game show, but Gene wanted to have humor on it. The producers didn't want that, and he got out of contract within 3 months of it. And then there was a couple of times that Match Game was going to be revived in the mid to late 80s, but they did an interview with Gene Rayburn on Entertainment Tonight in 1987, and they revealed his age to be 70, and that scared a lot of producers. They didn't want to hire somebody who was in their 70s around that time, and it got harder and harder for Gene to get jobs for hosting stuff. He ended up doing some summer stock stuff, and he, the last 12 years of his life, I heard, was very, very sad and depressed because of the success of Match Game, and it didn't lead to something else after it had ended and stuff. Gene became very private and stuff. He appeared on some local shows, and he appeared one more hosting a game show called Movie Masters for AMC back in 1989, but that was only a few months. Gene really wanted to host Match Game one more time, but they didn't bring him back in 1990 for ABC, which had devastated him. And in the 90s, his health was declining and stuff. He lost his wife Helen. They were married 56 years in 1996. He made some appearances on the Game Show Network premiered in 1994, but his health was declining. He moved briefly back to Hollywood in 1996 to be close to his game show colleagues, but in 1998 they did a last interview with Gene Rayburn. It was on Access Hollywood, and eventually it was shown on Game Show Network. Gene's health was failing. He was suffering from I think cancer and the beginnings of Alzheimer's disease. And the final year of his life, he lived with his daughter Lynn in Beverly, Massachusetts. In 1999, he received the Lifetime Achievement Award for daytime, but he was barely recognizable. He passed away in November of 1999 at the age of 82. And Gene Rayburn was probably one of the best game show hosts of all time. The Match Game was probably his claim to fame and stuff. He did a lot of other great things, but after Match Game's popularity ended in the early 1980s, the last 15 to 17 years of Gene Rayburn's life wasn't the best because he didn't didn't find something else for him to do after the Match Game popularity and stuff. It's too bad because he could have maybe hosted if cable television was very, very big in the 80s and stuff. He probably could have had his own reality show or his own talk show and stuff. But those things happen. And that's about it on Gene Rayburn. Tomorrow, for the match game personality profiles, the next one will be Richard Dawson, a panelist for Match Game for many years and a great game show host as well. Other video blogs tomorrow will be the top 10 best Bret Hart matches of all time, WWE Hall of Famer, because his birthday's tomorrow. And the other video blog will be about MBTA bus route 93 from Downtown Crossing to Sullivan Square via Bunker Hill Street in Charlestown. I hope you've been getting to enjoy these video blogs. I love doing them. Lots of surprises coming up. And see you tomorrow. And keep calm and harm with Julie, Brett, and Guy, and Molly Rosenblunt of Fox 35 Rocks. And in the words of former BMHS history teacher, Mr. Donald Stavely, happy day. Bye now.